Okay, how about sharing screen?
Share screen. But you're not seeing it, are you?
We're seeing your whole desktop.
There.
There, now it's good.
Wonderful. Let's see if it'll go. Ah, it will.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, so there is a progression in wildlife photography that's really important to be aware of. Initially, you just want a sharp bird or animal. And people will say, well, why did you take that photo? Because there's a branch in front of it. But what you really want the first time, and sort of in basic, is you just want a sharp bird. So this is a jay taken in Central Park. And it's a nice sharp bird. It's not usable for anything, but it's a nice sharp bird. And that's really where you start. From there, you really want to start to photograph some behavior. And preening is a really great behavior to photograph. It's not very fast, and it's just a good way to make sure that you can get some behavior and you can get it sharp. So this is a peregrine falcon taken at Sacramento Wildlife Refuge. And then what you will always be working on are your backgrounds. Backgrounds are everything in wildlife photography. This is a photo of a Cooper's hawk, a juvenile. And I was there, I heard it get this duck, it's a green-winged teal, and watched it fly off. I kept a respectful distance and followed to where it landed. So it's a nice photo of the bird, and it's a nice photo of the green-winged teal that it caught, but it's not usable because of that background. So backgrounds are so important in wildlife photography. This is another example. I love to photograph cardinals. They're so beautiful. And these were taken in Central Park in New York City as well. The male at the top, it's not a usable photo because of that nasty background. I was able with the female to be able to position myself so that I could use the water as a background and create a much more effective image. Now there is shadow across the back, so it's not a perfect image, but it's much more effective, you can tell, with a better background than the male up above. Once you're able to, you start concentrating on your backgrounds. Now you're looking for, let me get the action, but let me get the action in front of the correct background. So you position your vehicle or you position yourself in such a way to try and get the very best background. So these are secretary birds taken in Tanzania. And it's got that nice green background. The upper one is the male coming in toward the nest. And the lower one, it's nice that you get two birds in focus. And that is the male now leaving the nest to go get more nesting material. So starting to really concentrate on backgrounds and getting good backgrounds. A really important thing with wildlife photography is to be prepared for the action. So always be prepared. You may be just watching. So this is a great egret. The great egret was just minding its own business, fishing. And I was watching and photographing. And all of a sudden, in a split second, this red-winged blackbird female took off after the egret. And the action was split second. So if I hadn't had my appropriate settings already dialed in, there's no chance I could have gotten this photo. So always be prepared for the action. Now this photo, of course, I wish there wasn't that white sky there, but I was happy at least that one part of the white sky sort of highlighted the little red-winged blackbird that's after the great egret. And that was taken at Fern Hill outside of Portland. The lower photo is taken at the rhododendron garden in Portland. this eagle was sitting on a log in the water. It had gone several times after birds, after ducks. So I knew it was hunting. So again, I had my settings ready. Because if you wait until the moment the action happens, you've missed it. So I had the settings all there. These buffalo heads, all of a sudden, a whole flock of buffalo heads flew in. They didn't know that the eagle was there. And in a split second, that eagle took off, grabbed this female buffalo head, and then flew off with it. So again, always have your settings ready for action. And what you want to do is you want to bring it all together. So this is in Jigakudani, Hell's Canyon in Japan. This is in the hot spring. There are many people photographing now. In 2006, there couldn't have been 25 people in the whole place. And this time there had to be hundreds of people. It's so hard. So I had to search out an area where I knew I had a decent background, where it wasn't likely anybody was going to be able to walk into it. And then get your settings all ready and wait for the action. So this is a snow monkey who's all of a sudden coming out of the water, just flinging himself out. And there's actually a monkey chasing him. So they're having fun. And he looks like it. So this is what I'm aiming for, are images that really tell a story and bring the emotion out. A couple of other examples of progression. These are all northern harriers. The upper northern harrier I took quite a few years ago at Las Colinas. And I was happy with it at the time. It's got a sharp eye, it's got a catch light, but it's not a very compelling image. The two images below have a much nicer background. They've got a much better wing pattern. And so this is more what you're looking for as you progress in wildlife photography. The bird on the left is the female northern harrier. The one on the right is what they call the gray ghost, or the male northern harrier. But
it seems that the key is that you have light on, in this case, the underside of the wings.
Absolutely.
As well as the upper part.
In the world. Another progression, the upper wood duck, these are all basically taken in Portland. The upper wood duck, it's okay. But I think as you go kind of counterclockwise, the backgrounds get better, and it really makes a difference in how compelling the image is, how the bird really stands out. So these are all wood ducks, all men. So my go-to settings when I start out every morning photographing, I shoot raw with auto white balance. I don't see any reason to mess with the white balance, because as long as I'm shooting raw, I can deal with it later. And I do frequently tweak it just a little bit. I shoot manual with auto ISO. It took me a long time to switch, but once I did, I would never go back. I limit that auto ISO to what I feel is the maximum for the given camera body that I'm using. So usually what I have it limited to is 12,800. I don't often let it get that high, but that's the limit I put on. I shoot wide open. The exact value is going to depend on the lens I have. I shoot 1/2000th of a second. If light is really limited first thing in the morning, I'll drop it down to 1/1000th of a second. But as soon as I have enough light, and if they're little birds, I'll send it up to 1/3200 and even higher sometimes. Exposure compensation, I always set at 0. I try to always set at 0. Burst mode, continuous high. I use back button focus. I know a fair number of photographers are switching back to shutter, but it's so ingrained in me that I definitely am sticking with my back button focus. I set the eye tracking to my anticipated subject, be it bird or animal. I don't really know that it makes a huge difference, because I've had it on the wrong one before, and it still does a pretty nice job of tracking. I set my camera controls up pretty much the way Steve Perry has recommended. And then I've tweaked things to meet my specific needs. The most important thing I think I can tell you is get in the habit of checking your settings before you head out. I can't tell you how many times I blow the first photos that I take because I forgot that my exposure compensation was -1 or +1, or even worse. So I always try to set that, just to make sure that everything is set appropriately before I start out in the morning. This bird is a phenopepla female, and it was taken in the Las Vegas area. So some other general tips, definitely approach birds or wildlife quietly, slowly, maintain a respectful distance. There is no photo that is worth stressing or endangering your subject. And these days, I'm so happy that the big competitions will automatically disqualify your photo if it looks like the animal has been stressed by what you're doing. I think that's wonderful. Always shoot burst mode and ignore that pray and spray comment that you get all the time. Sorry about my dog. Ignore those comments. Now, you don't get them nearly as much anymore because if we're shooting silently with our mirrorless cameras, nobody knows how many photos you're taking. But I would just always roll my eyes and say, this person clearly knows nothing about wildlife photography if they're making that snide remark. Always try to initiate focus as soon as you can, and then put the shutter down when the bird or the animal is where you want them in your frame. But the sooner you initiate focus, the better. And then I always find I seem to stop just a moment or two, a couple of frames too early. Take photos a little bit longer than you think you might need to. Now, these two photos, this is certainly the photo that the one on the right is the one that I'm best known for. But I think these have a really important tale to tell. The one on the left, now they are post-processed just a little bit differently. But when I submitted them, they weren't. They were processed exactly the same. So the one on the left, I submitted to Wildlife Photographer of the Year because it's critically endangered species, and this was only the 5th set of twins. So it's a really unique event. But the way Wildlife Photographer of the Year works is that they get 50,000 submitted images. Out of those, they take it down to 1,000. And out of those 1,000, they ask you to submit your original raw capture as it came out of the camera and a high res. So this photo on the left made it to that top 1,000, but didn't make it to the top 100. So I went back through all the photos that I had taken, and I found 2, like the one on the right, where the baby's tongue was sticking out. So now you've clearly got all 6 eyes and you've got the tongue sticking out. I then resubmitted this the following year because no one's mountain gorilla with twins had won, and mine didn't necessarily need to win, but somebody's I thought should win. And so I resubmitted this, and lo and behold, when I resubmitted it, then I made it into that top 100, and I made it into the exhibit, and this photo has continued. I'll show you a bit later, but continued to do really well to this day. But that's the important thing. If I had taken fewer images, I likely would have missed the only 2 frames that had the tongue sticking out. And everyone around the world that comments on this photo mentions the tongue. A few more tips. Don't chimp. So don't spend time in the field looking at the back of your camera. You need to just quickly look at the histogram, make sure that you haven't blown out your whites. I always set it to blinkies. And now with the mirrorless, I can actually see the histogram as I'm shooting. So it's made it much easier. So you want to assess that, and you want to assess that you've got enough shutter speed to stop the action, to have the photo that you want. But beyond that, don't waste your time chimping, basically. This is a Gen 2 penguin, and this was taken on Bleecker Island in the Falklands. Composition. There's a lot you can do in the field with composition. So initially, of course, you just want to, you see an orangutan, you want to make sure that you've got some good sharp photos of the orang. But then start looking, look at your background. Is there a way that you can move a foot this way, a foot that way, and get a better, cleaner background? Are you able to get far enough away from the background that you can nicely blur it? Can you then move the subject out of the middle and get a more dynamic composition? You can do this if you are in a position where you're watching a bird and the bird is going to fly. Well, can I change my position just a little bit so that when the bird flies, it's going to have a beautiful green background or a beautiful background as opposed to just that plain blue sky. And always crop carefully. Just make sure you're not cutting off wingtips, you're not cutting off fingertips. Make it look like it's a very purposeful crop. This is an orangutan and her baby taken in Borneo in 2015. We talked about animals are most active at dusk and dawn, so you do have the problem with low light levels at that time. Therefore, having the ability to go to high ISOs is really important with wildlife photography. And it's really helped a lot that we have Topaz Denoise that deals so nicely with noise these days. But probably the most important thing I can share with you about light is modeled light kills an image. I can deal with my subject being totally in the dark, and I can deal, totally in shade, and I can deal with it being totally in the sun. But if you have modeled light, you have nothing. Look at this image. It should be a beautiful image of this silverback with this baby. They're so relaxed. The baby is happy being there. And it's an image that's not usable because of the modeled light. So I basically won't even shoot anymore in modeled light. I will do everything I can to try and move the subject or move my body so the subject is totally either in shade or sun. But modeled light, it's just a killer for images. What I do love to do is when I find a situation where I can have the light basically just shining right on a bird or an animal, and then get that really beautiful dark background. This was taken in Portland. It's a common merganser female. And I had to really stop down also because it was very bright light shining right on her, and I didn't want to blow out those whites. But I really like the way that it comes out almost like there's a spotlight right on the bird. And this bird actually, this image did win in the NAMPA showcase a couple of years ago. A few other considerations. Obviously, you want the animal moving into the frame. It's not a compelling image if the animal's moving out of the frame. Eye contact is so important, like this lioness, both being right at her level and making eye contact. With this being on the level, one thing I see so often is that I don't think people really understand sometimes about this getting low. Everybody wants to get really low because that's going to be your best image, but it's not necessarily. So you need to know why you're getting low. I've seen people get really low, and then I realize that what they're getting is now they've got a horrible background. But if they just, perhaps in this case, maybe if you stand up, you get a better background. So understand why you're positioning yourself the way you are, and it will really help you to get a more compelling image and a better background. The lioness was taken actually in Namibia. head angle in bird photography is really important. It seems kind of trivial, but just when the head is just a few degrees pointed toward you is so much better of an image than if it's just slightly pointed away from you. So always watch for that and wait. I wait until the angle is just right and then get the photo. Watch for those distracting shadows, either from branches, but in hummingbirds and other birds with a large bill, you frequently will get it coming down the front of their body. And that's really distracting and not a very good image.
Just a little aside, if you enlarge the eyes, you can actually see the safari vehicles reflected in them.
Yes, it's true. The other thing I watch for are merges. And the photo, the lower photo is a fish eagle calling to its mate. I love the foliage and I love the position of the head. However, to me, this image has a fatal flaw. And that fatal flaw is the tail feather merging with the foliage. So do watch for those merges. Sometimes there's nothing you can. But if you have an option to turn a little bit, to move a little bit and avoid the merge, it makes a much more compelling image. Another really important thing, first of all, know your subject and know how dangerous they can be, and give your animals space. These photos were taken in Yellowstone a couple of weeks ago. It's a big snowstorm. It was kind of fun to be photographing out there. But like always happens, we stopped and had a few minutes to photograph, and then all of a sudden there must have been 25 or 30 people there. And while we're photographing, it's the upper photo. The moose is just eating. He's very relaxed. It's no problem. But as people come and they're moving closer and closer, they're making a lot of noise. All of a sudden, in a split second, he went nuts. And it's the lower photo where he looks crazed, and he was crazed, and he charged right at all those photographers. Now, moose are very dangerous and they will trample you to death. There's no doubt about it. So it's just so important to give the animal the space that they need. And we were lucky, people scattered and no one got injured, but certainly they could have, especially the guy who had thrown himself into the snowbank to get the very best photo. So know your subject and be very careful, be respectful of them, but also take care of yourself at the same time. I believe in working the scene. So if you have a cooperative subject, stay there, work the scene. This is taken in Valley of Fire, and most people do take landscape photos there. I go for the bighorn sheep. But these bighorn sheep stayed around me for 3 hours. So there's always a better photo to be had. So keep working it. I worked it until they finally went away. Never leave a really compelling subject just because you've got a few photos, thinking there's something better around the corner, because lots of times there isn't. So stick with your subject. So both of these were taken in Valley of Fire about a year ago. Just a couple tips for entering competitions, because I do think that especially the international ones are wonderful. Only enter those that are reputable. Do read the fine print, because you'd be amazed at what rights you can be giving away to your images. Read and follow the rules. A number of images a significant number get eliminated just because someone didn't follow the rules. And images that are really good images and could have done well, but they didn't follow the rules. And if you think that you're going to get away with cloning just a little bit here or there, the big competitions will make you submit that original raw capture, and they will pixel peep, and you will get eliminated if you have done anything. So know when you're photographing it that you eliminate as much as you can at the time, and you can crop. That's within reason, you can crop, but you cannot remove anything. And if you have a choice of subjects, try to pick one that's as pristine as possible. Now, in this image, it's a ringtail lemur with her twin babies. this would never do anything because of that big patch of missing fur. Now, it might do something in a competition where you could tell a story of the toxic plants in their environment that they're eating that are causing this. But for the most part, for most competitions, they're going to want a really beautiful specimen, basically. So this was taken also in Madagascar. So these are a couple of images I'll show you that have done really well. This was the mountain gorilla rolling her eyes. This was my first photo that was recognized on an international level, was highly honored in Nature's Best in 2012 and was in the Smithsonian. And when I went back to the Smithsonian, I was actually a bit embarrassed by the photo because so many of the photos were so beautiful. And this one has this crappy background. But the reason that it did so well is because what I captured is something that they'd never seen before. This is a teenage mountain gorilla. I was spending too much time looking right at her. And she looked at me, and just like a human teenager, she rolled her eyes. And I was able to catch it just at the very peak. So that's why it did well, despite the fact that it's a pretty crappy background. This is the photo, of course, that you've seen before, and the one that I'm certainly best known for. It was commended in Wildlife Photography of the Year in 2013. It's taken in Rwanda. As I said, it's the 5th set of twins ever reported in mountain gorillas. And this photo has continued to do well for all these years. So that was 2011. I took it 2013. It's commended. And to this day, they continue to put it into any new, this is the museum now, any books, anything like that. And they actually just in 2022 set up an exhibit called Unforgettable Behavior. And the exhibit was actually in the Smithsonian. So they used her, and then the Smithsonian chose to use her as their big banner that looks out onto the mall. So I was very happy with that because I've been in lots of museums and everything, but this was the first time that I really had a photo that was seen by anybody walking on the mall, would see this mountain gorilla with her twins and kind of maybe get the story a little bit because of that. The photos I wanted to tell you a little bit more about are these long-tailed tit. These photos were taken in 2017 in Hokkaido, in Japan. And to me, it kind of summarizes everything about wildlife photography. You have to be flexible. The day that we went to take these, the day we went, that I took these photos, we were going to Lake Kashara because it's a geothermal lake, and that's where the Hooper swans tend to congregate. So the plan was to photograph the Hooper swans. That's what everybody goes there for. But I took one look at those Hooper swans, and they were filthy. There's no way. I mean, I got better photos in 2006 with my little point and shoot, so I wasn't going to waste my time. So I looked around at different birds, and it was minus 25 degrees. It was so cold and it was miserable. So I headed back to the vehicle. And about 50 feet from the vehicle, the local guide pointed out this icicle and these tiny little birds doing this sort of dance as they went back and forth, nibbling on the tip of the icicle. Well, I took one look at that and said, oh my God, I have never seen, I mean, talk about survival and talk about beautiful little birds. These are the size of the bush tits that we have in the Berkeley area. I've never seen behavior like this. And if I've never seen behavior like this, I'm going to bet most of the world hasn't seen this kind of behavior either. So I set up my tripod and I started to photograph. There are several things. They move very fast. So I need a very fast shutter speed, but I have very low light. The other complicating factor is these birds move so fast. I quickly decided this is very similar to a hummingbird. And I don't try to focus on the hummingbird. I focus where the hummingbird is going to go. and then get the hummingbird when it reaches there. So for this, I decided you focus on the tip of the icicle, and every time they come near, you're going to hit your shutter. The problem is, okay, you've got a busy background. So you've got a busy background, but you need more depth of field because you're not focusing on the bird, you're focusing on the icicle. So there are lots of moving parts, and there is no right answer. There's no perfect answer to this problem. So the good news is that we're continuing to come back and forth. So for 2 days, 4 hours each day, I photographed these little birds trying all different kinds of settings. When I got back to the room and I looked at these photos on my computer, I wanted to cry because it was not what I had hoped for or envisioned. That messy background just broke my heart. So rather than delete anything, I kept the images for about 3 weeks. And then I said, okay, I still believe this is a winning situation. This is something people haven't seen. So I went through and I picked maybe a dozen photos that I worked on that I thought had merit, and then submitted them to different competitions. And lo and behold, every single place I submitted one of these different, always different photos, but from this photo shoot, everything I submitted won. So this is actually the amateur winner for Audubon in 2018. And this one was highly commended in the Wildlife Photographer of the Year 2019. And I actually know it was almost the winner of its category, but got beat out, but very close. And you can see the difference here on this one. Okay, I'm shooting at 1/5000th of a second, so you can see those wings are tack sharp. On this one, I'm actually only shooting at 1/1600th of a second, and you can see that the wings are not sharp. And that's part of the reason I actually submitted the other image to Audubon, thinking that was certainly the better of the 2 images. And this one I submitted to Wildlife Photographer of the Year because there's only 4 birds that will be one of the winners. So it had less of a chance, but I was happy when it did end up being in the exhibit. So that's kind of what goes into a winning photo shoot, where it's a unique event and you're able to deal with all the different compounding factors and come out with an image that looks pretty good. And most importantly, it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be what the judges have never seen before. Just a couple tips for anybody going on a safari. Always take 2 camera bodies and a variety of lenses. Always have several batteries, particularly in a cold climate. But the other thing is have those batteries where you can readily reach them. I always have them in a waist pack, and it takes me seconds to change batteries. I have seen so many people, photographers, on these kind of safaris, and they have to go looking for their bag to somehow find their batteries, and you miss the action. So be prepared. I'm so paranoid about batteries that I actually will always take 2 battery chargers, unless I know somebody else is shooting with the exact same camera and I could borrow, in a pinch, I could borrow their charger. Because if you don't have batteries, then you have nothing. And always take plenty of memory cards. Always have a way to back up your images. I use 2 4-terabyte external hard drives that I download my images as soon as I get back to the room to both of those. And then I do reformat my cards. A power strip is really, really helpful because frequently the rooms or the tents only have 1 or 2 plugs, and you're going to have a lot of things that you need to charge. And of course, always arrange for a local guide because they know where the animals are and what the patterns are. So this is a giraffe that's actually taken in Mala Mala in South Africa. Another really important thing, I think, if you're going to go on a workshop, you're going to go on a safari, yes, the best photos are probably always going to be taken in the morning and in the evening during the time that the animals are most active. But as far as I'm concerned, if I'm going on a once in a lifetime trip, I am not going to take a siesta at noontime after lunch. I am going to continue to photograph. Maybe the light's not going to be perfect, but I'm not going to take a chance on missing out on anything. I can sleep when I get home, but I need to be there photographing. And in this particular instance, nobody would go with me. This is in Costa Rica. Nobody wanted to, they all wanted to take their nap. So I went on my own. I'm on this hanging bridge, and all of a sudden I hear something next to me. I just about jump off the hanging bridge, and here it is, the howler monkeys. And they're right next to me. They were a little startled at first as well, but I spent 20, 30 minutes with, I'm in the trees because it's like this hanging bridge, and they're all around me. It was just a magnificent sighting. And yes, it was tough photography, and some of the photos weren't usable, but many were. And this was a really nice photo that I got, and it's sold and done well. So just take full advantage. If you're going to go on these trips, then please take full advantage. For anyone interested in what I'm shooting, I've always been a Nikon shooter. A couple of years ago, I did switch to Sony. So these are the cameras, the A1 and the A7, of course, my backup. And I just really have the 3 lenses of Sony. I have the 1.4 teleconverter, but I would only put it on the 70 to 200 2.8 lens. I know people do put it on the 200 to 600, but it doesn't work for me. And I always use a harness to carry my camera because it makes sure that I don't have anything hanging at my neck. This is an oryx, and this was taken in Namibia. Post-processing, I use Photo Mechanic to download and organize my photos. I don't use Lightroom. Most wildlife photographers do probably use Lightroom, but Photo Mechanic is just lightning fast. And I want to get those photos onto those 2 external hard drives as fast as I can, reformat my cards, and be ready to go again. So I use Photo Mechanic. Then I use Camera Raw and Photoshop for processing. I'm frequently using Topaz Denoise. I very seldom use the Sharpen AI, except maybe specifically on eyes or some small body part. But other than that, I don't use it much. And I use Nik software for any black and white conversion that I do. This is, again, a snow monkey taken in Jigakadani. And that's basically it. That's my contact information. My website, Instagram, Facebook. I update my photos probably much more quickly on Instagram and Facebook than I get them onto my website, but eventually I do get them there. And my email address if anyone has any questions. So at this point, I guess I can stop sharing and answer any questions.
Fantastic, Diana. As far as I'm concerned, this is a perfect presentation for the Camera Club.
Beautiful. Absolutely.
Absolutely so useful and inspiring. Thank you so very much. And I'd like to ask you, did you actually see animals there in Namibia?
Oh, yes. Yes.
It looks like such a stark and empty landscape.
Well, it is. In the Dedvlei or Sossusvlei area, you're going to see the oryx, and that's what you want coming across the dunes.
And is that what you saw in that photo there that we're looking at?
This is Dedvlei, yeah. But the photo that you saw, that one was taken more in a different part of Namibia near Etosha. And in Etosha, then you see lions, you see the desert elephants, you see all kinds of birds, all the animals really in that part of Namibia.
I'd like to ask if you've read any of the books of Martin and Oza Johnson, who were the early husband and wife wildlife team that did a lot of photographing in Namibia, or I forget who the other one was, that just showed the incredible density of wildlife in Namibia back in the day, which of course is not there anymore.
Yes, yeah. I mean, the thing I found in Namibia that just amazed me is that there are areas of Namibia where children who are 20 or 21 years old have never seen a drop of rain from the sky.
Yeah, wow.
Wow.
Just amazing.
Stunning.
So any questions anybody has that I can answer?
I have one. This is Marcia Kirschbaum. I'm looking at your equipment, and I do have a Sony 70-200 2.8, and I've kind of wanted to do wildlife, but really haven't tried it because I never thought that the 200 was enough of a reach. And I'm wondering, have you used the 1.4 teleconverter on it, and does it degrade the sharpness very much?
No, the 1.4 teleconverter on that lens is beautiful. Lovely. I would use it without any concern whatsoever, because you're really still only going to be shooting at about 4. And you can get what, 380, almost 300. So it would be perfect on that. Now, again, you're going to need something that's fairly close to you, because 300 is probably not going to be enough for a lot of birds, unless they're the egrets and the brown pelicans and that kind of thing.
Okay, well, that's good to hear. And it was also nice to hear you talk about what animals would be good for what lenses. Really appreciated that and made me a little more hopeful.
Yes. As you could see, I mean, that brown pelican that I took was pretty good, especially given the camera equipment I was using at the time. So yeah, you just have to match them, that's all. And there are lots of beautiful things you can get.
Hi, this is Ada. I was wondering, in your bio, you said being an anesthesiologist prepared you for wildlife photography, and I had wondered why, how?
Because as an anesthesiologist, you have to be prepared for anything that's going to happen in a split second.
Right.
A lot of time watching, observing, and when all hell breaks loose, you respond just really fast. And it's the same thing with wildlife photography. You watch and you observe, just like the eagle that was sitting on the log. I watched him, I've got everything ready. And then the moment he takes off, it's split second. So it's very much the same thing. I'm very patient, I'm very observant, and I can react really fast when the action happens.
Thank you for that perspective. I also wondered, what is buffer depth?
How many photos you can take before it's how fast your card is your images are getting transferred to that card. And if you can get to a point where you can't take any more photos until the camera can transfer those images.
Oh, okay, that's a new concept for me. Thank you very much. Beautiful presentation. Absolutely wonderful.
Diane, I have a question about vignettes. I noticed on some of your photos you used vignettes. Some a light vignette, some a dark vignette, some no vignette at all, as in the case of the photo here. Is it just a case-by-case decision on your part, or do you have a general rule or practice that you follow?
No, it's definitely just case by case. Like that, I like to go for a natural vignette, like that one bighorn sheep, where I was able to get the weeds all around so that it's a very light. It looks like I applied a vignette, but it's actually not a vignette at all. It's just the weeds are very light all around it. So as much as I can, I like to go for natural. And then it's a case-by-case basis if I decide to do a vignette at all.
And another question about composition. Do you often look at a scene and say to yourself, I have a certain frame here, but I can recrop or recompose in post? And so that you get the photograph in one sense within a certain frame in the moment, but you have in the back of your mind that you can reframe it a different way.
Yes. I will try as best I can to get the photo that I want in the field, but especially because I'm shooting a 50 megapixel camera, I know that I can crop. And so sometimes, yes, purposely, I'll know I'll take it one way, but I'll know that, like with the wolves that I was just photographing in Yellowstone, I knew that I would end up cropping in. So I like it both ways. So yes, I do some photograph that way.
Thank you.
Well, that would seem to tie in. Hi, this is Tom in Chesapeake. That would seem to tie in with your sense of giving the animal space, your subject space within the frame, as well as giving them physical space when they're in the wild. At the same time, your recommendation that you don't stop shooting when you think you've got your photograph. You keep looking for the moments that happen after an action that you think has reached its peak, but you keep photographing a little bit more because you will find that more interesting things, or at least as interesting things, can happen afterwards if you're paying attention.
And it's surprising how often it's like, oh my God, I stopped one frame too short. I just needed that next moment. So I try to get myself to photograph just a little bit longer. And yes, it does end up that I have to delete more photos later, but that's okay. You can always do that, but you can't get back what you didn't take.
Right.
So
Very well done. Thank you.
I do have one other question. I find deleting very difficult. That's probably a problem that amateurs have, because we keep praying that the photograph will be better the second time we do it. But how a photo mechanic, I know you can easily gather photos, but I think deleting is one of the hardest things to do. And do you find yourself repenting after a deletion?
you know, I'm terrible at deleting, which is why I had to just get my second set of 18 terabyte.
Oops, sorry.
Thank you. I don't feel so bad now.
Me either.
Nor do I
as
feel
a-
so bad.
As a victim of a person who suffered several hard drive failures, I had images that were backed up on one exterior drive or auxiliary drive, and then those same images backed up on a second auxiliary drive, and both of those drives failed.
Whoa.
So there is a rule about having a third backup. Well,
I'm totally paranoid. I have my working hard drive. I have a backup to the working hard drive. I have what I call the archive to that. And then I have another archive that I keep in the safe deposit box at the bank. So I have 4 18 terabyte hard drives. But that way, I should never lose the photo. And
right.
if there's a disaster in this house, I should still have the photos that are at the bank, hopefully. And I figure if both of those go, then probably it's a really bad situation. And
We're all gone.
What the hey?
yep.
Thanks so much.
Answer about wildlife photography. It's a wonderful thing. I really think it's worth giving a try. You can get to it easily, though.
Just a quick comment on backups.
Yes.
Your strategy is well taken and a good idea. There is another approach. The offsite backup is a great idea, and everyone should consider doing that. But on-site, a RAID 5, which is an arrangement of hard disks that uses multiple hard disks that all cooperate in recording the same thing locally, RAID, and the number 5, is nearly indestructible. You can literally take one of the hard disks out after it fails and replace it and not lose a byte of information. You ought to look it up on macsales.com. They have the full explanation of what RAID is and all the different choices, but I would recommend RAID 5.
I
Yeah,
have RAID 4. How much better is the 5?
It's a little bit more robust.
Twenty-
RAID 4 is not bad.
25% better.
Thank you.
For quite a few years, and then decided it was a little redundant in that on a daily basis, I'm always, and as soon as I get back from a trip, I'm always putting them onto all the different backups. So I actually got rid of my RAID system, I have to say.
Aha.
Diana, this is Marcia Kirschbaum again. I noticed that on your equipment, and I'm sorry about harping about the equipment, because I'm not sure I can get the skills yet to take images like you, but what made you choose the A7 IV, and have you used that for your animal photography, for your nature photography, and how do you like it?
I like it. I don't use it often because it is my backup. So I usually use the Sony A1. The real reason I didn't, I mean, that I got the Sony A7 IV as my backup is I simply couldn't afford another Sony A1. But I have used it because sometimes, like if I'm in Africa, I'll never change a lens in the field. So I will put the lens that I think I'm going to use the majority of the time on the Sony A1, and then I'll put my other lens that I think is going to be helpful on the A7 IV. And when I have used it, I have gotten very nice photos. For me, the one difference is that the Sony A1 will take 20 to 30 frames a second, and the Sony A7 IV is, I think, more in the 10 range, maybe 10 to 20. So definitely the Sony A1 is faster. And that's one of the reasons I use it as my primary. But I think the Sony A7 IV is a wonderful camera. I have no complaints in the photos I have used it, taken with it.
I appreciate that because it is actually my full-time camera, and I was just kind of curious and to see how it was as a backup camera, but I realize there's a lot of other things that I would have to learn first besides the camera.
You can
Yeah.
definitely use that camera and get wonderful photos. Absolutely.
I'd like to ask about your harness because it certainly seems
Sorry,
like
Lorinda, could I just interrupt quickly? I have to sign off because I'm going to go read to Maud and put her to bed. So I just wanted to say thank you so much, Diana. That was brilliantly informative, and I just really loved seeing all of your gorgeous images. So thank you so much for your
just
time.
in case you didn't know, Diana, Lindsay is one of our premier macro insect photographers. She has some amazing stuff.
Oh, wonderful. Look for that. Thank you.
Maud says good night as well. Thank you so much.
Night, Mom.
Night, night, Maud.
Night, Bud.
Night, Maud, do you say good night? Okay, the cat says good night.
Good night. Good night.
So again, I'd just like to ask about that harness. You say you don't like monopods, but you do use tripods. But the harness is your sort of go-to camera carrying device?
Absolutely. In fact, I always second one on any trip because I would be lost without it.
And what brand would you recommend? What style?
Let me grab it 1 second and I'll tell you.
Okay.
It's the Optech harness. I have the one that's double, so you can carry 2 cameras with that harness, although I find it very awkward to do that. Or you can carry a camera and binoculars with it. But it fits so that it's over your shoulders. And it actually feels pretty good on your back, and it never touches your neck, which for me is critical.
What was the name of that harness again?
Optech, OPTECH.
Oh,
Thank you.
Your harness, and as I said, mine is the double. I think they do have a single harness as well. But they're wonderful, absolutely wonderful.
we have a member of our club who is probably our best wildlife photographer, or at least one of the top 2 or 3 that we have, who has innovated a camera carrying device where she wears a fanny pack in the front and then puts her camera on a monopod, rests the monopod inside the fanny pack, and then can swivel it around as she wants, and the weight is carried on her hips.
Yes, we have to be.
And she has a stabilizing strap, I believe, around her neck, just to
Mhm.
keep it from dropping.
Yeah, sounds like a pretty good way.
Yeah, it's pretty clever.
Well, I said over the years, I've really found this thing just works great for me. And I don't shoot many times on a tripod unless it's like the little bird nibbling on the tip of the icicle, because then I know exactly where I need to be. And for that, it worked beautifully.
Fantastic.
Were you using an external shutter release for that, of those images as well?
For the,
Of the bird, of the little bird with the icicle?
you better believe it, because it's my were freezing.
Yeah,
And it worked beautifully.
When you say
those are fantastic images.
when you say shutter release, electronic or mechanical? In other words, is it attached to the camera that you press? Or
Yes. I've had both. So I've had the one that was wireless, and I've had the one attached. Personally, I have found the one that's attached to be the best. So that's what I had the wireless one sometimes work, sometimes not work. And I just didn't want to take that chance.
Good,
And
thank you.
it's really worked beautifully, yeah.
Well, if there are no more questions for
Oh.
Diana,
Real quick one. We're celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Mac. Which are you, Mac or PC?
Mac.
Thank you.
that seems to be predominantly what the camera club uses.
Puts me up. I'll go sometimes on these little trips, and I'll look at the airport. Everybody's got their little computer out, and they're all Macs. I see Apple, Apple, Apple. Like,
Thank you very much. This has been wonderful.
This is just really, again, the ideal camera club presentation, just ideal. Inspiration plus information.